there, Buttercups. Your resident T-Bell here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the T-Bell. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? Alright, so I love my strange facts, right? So, let's talk about the fact that the Golden Ram could fly between the worlds, which linked the mortal and divine realms. Okay? That the never sleeping dragon made it nearly impossible to steal the Golden Fleece without help. And the sea where Hela fell still exists today and has been historically important for trade and war routes. The myth of Aries may symbolize kingship and divine legitimacy, since possession of the Golden Fleece meant rightful rule. The Argonauts' quest may have been inspired by ancient Greek trade expeditions to the Black Sea. And the fact that the myth begins with a planned human sacrifice. See, human sacrifices appear in many ancient mythologies, and this story may reflect early rituals where kings offered human victims during times of crisis. So rescues may occur, but the myth never forgets the dark beginning. And then we talk about the dragon in the sky. Some later astrologers speculated that the ram and the dragon represent two cosmic forces. So the ram represented Aries, the spark of life and courage. Anyhow, the dragon would represent the guardian of powerful destiny. Though it is not an official constellation connection, mystical traditions like to imagine a hidden myth link because of this. You know what I mean? Now, there actually could be a real basis of this myth. And so it could be actually based on real ancient gold mining. So, some historians believe the myth of the Golden Fleece might have originated from a real technique used in the Caucasus region. Miners placed sheepskins in mountain streams to trap gold particles in the wool. Once dried, the wool shimmered with gold dust, creating what looked like a golden fleece. This technique was reportedly used near the region of ancient Colchis. So, the mythical treasure might have been inspired by real ancient technology. And then we have to remember the symbol of courage and action, because we recall that the ram saved Phrixus by charging into the sky and escaping danger. Because of this, Aries became associated with bravery, leadership, and initiative. These traits carried over into astrology, where Aries is known as the warrior of the zodiac. So for the last 2 weeks, we've dived deep into the Aries personality, what makes them the way they are. Well, astrology really truly becomes more engaging when you tie it to mythology, which means that this week we are going to dive deep into the Greek myth of Aries. Now, the Aries constellation is connected to the Golden Ram from Greek mythology, and the Aries constellation really comes from the legend of the Golden Ram, and that is where the ram itself was placed among the stars. What makes this captivating is the themes of heroism, sacrifice, adventure, destiny, and so much more. And it shows us that Aries represents the hero beginning the quest, as we learned the last 2 weeks. Now, this story is so interesting because it includes betrayal, divine rescue, sacrifice, curses, golden treasure, heroic quest, and even ancient ritual symbolism. The ram that represents Aries is not just a random animal symbol. Its origin comes from one of the most dramatic rescue missions in Greek mythology, which is also to involve royal children, jealous queens, flying magic, and eventually the legendary Golden Fleece. That legendary Golden Fleece is often portrayed as a shining treasure of heroism and glory. But when we dig deeper into the ancient myths, this story becomes so much darker. And eventually, this story becomes one of the darkest tragedies in Greek mythology. So let's unravel the myth. Picture it. Long ago, in the kingdom of Boeotia, there ruled a king named Athamas. He had 2 children, Phrixus and Hela, and their mother was the cloud nymph Nephele. But things turned dark quickly. King Athamas remarried a woman named Ino. And Ino despised her stepchildren, okay? And she plotted to eliminate them so her own children could inherit the throne. And her plan was very clear and very clever and very cruel. She secretly roasted all of the kingdom's grain seeds. And when crops failed, eventually famine spread. And then she bribed messengers to lie about an oracle's prophecy. This fake prophecy claimed the gods demanded the sacrifice of Phrixus to end the famine. Now, King Athamas, desperate to save his people, agreed to sacrifice his own son. But the children's mother, Nephele, begged the gods for help, and suddenly salvation arrived. Out of the sky came a magnificently winged ram with golden wool. This magical creature had been sent by Hermes, the trickster messenger of the gods. The ram lifted Phrixus and Helle onto its back and soared into the sky. Imagine this scene. Storm clouds, a glowing golden ram, two terrified children clinging to its wool while the earth shrinks beneath them. It's one of the earliest flying rescue stories in mythology. Now, unfortunately, during the flight, disaster struck. As they crossed a narrow sea passage, Helle slipped from the ram's back and fell into the ocean below. The waters were later named Hellespont, meaning Sea of Helle. This strait is now called the Dardanelles, located in modern Turkey. The ram continued flying until it reached the distant land of Colchis, which is in modern-day Georgia. There, Phrixus was welcomed by the king Aeetes to thank the gods for saving him. Phrixus sacrificed the golden ram to Zeus. But the ram's story did not end there. Now, that golden fleece, the ram's shimmering golden wool, was sacred. Okay? King Aeetes hung it in a sacred grove, and it was guarded by a nightmarish creature. It was a massive dragon that never slept. This creature is sometimes described as a serpent-like creature coiled around the sacred tree, immortal and always awake. And the idea of a never-sleeping guardian symbolizes that this treasure was not meant to be taken by mortals. This treasure became one of the most famous objects in mythology. It symbolized power, kingship, and divine favor. But years later, a hero named Jason would set out to retrieve this fleece. And Jason was born into royal drama, and this is where his dangerous destiny begins. Okay, his father, Aeson, was a rightful king, but the throne was stolen by his power-hungry half-brother Pelias. Now, in order to protect baby Jason, his mother pretended he had died and secretly sent him away. He was raised by the wise centaur Chiron, who trained many Greek heroes. Jason grew up not knowing he was destined to reclaim a stolen kingdom. Now, when Jason became an adult, he traveled back to claim his throne. And on the way, he helped an old woman cross a raging river. In doing so, he lost one sandal in the water. The twist? The old woman was actually Hera in disguise. Pelias had been warned. Beware the man who arrives wearing one sandal. And that's why Jason walked straight into the palace looking exactly like that. This prophecy had arrived at Pelias' door. Now, instead of killing Jason outright, Pelias tried to be more cunning. So he told Jason, "Bring me the legendary Golden Fleece, and the throne is yours." And this is where Pelias assumed Jason would never survive. Okay? Because remember, the Golden Fleece came from a magical ram sent by the gods. It was protected by the never-sleeping dragon. But Jason took this challenge. He gathered a legendary crew known as the Argonauts. Their ship was the Argo, and among the crew were some of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. He- Hercules, Orpheus, Castor, Pollux, and Atalanta. It was basically the Avengers of Greek mythology. This adventure is actually one of the most epic journeys in Greek mythology. Now, of course, being an epic journey in Greek mythology, this was not going to be an easy journey. It was going to be brutal, it was going to be strange. So, these men faced the clashing rocks. Okay? So, there were two giant rocks that smashed ships to pieces. So, the strategy was that they sent a bird through first. When it survived, they rode as fast as possible. This ship barely escaped being crushed. Okay? So then they move on to the sirens, who were deadly creatures singing sailors to their doom. But Orpheus saved the crew by playing music louder and more beautiful than the siren's song. Now, this quest was only made possible because of dark magic. Because when Jason finally reached Colchis, he could have never succeeded alone. Because that's when he met the king's daughter, Medea. She was a powerful witch, a priestess, and she fell deeply in love with Jason thanks to Hera and Aphrodite's influence. And Medea secretly decided to help him. Now, she was so powerful that she could create potions, put the dragon to sleep, and help Jason survive impossible trials. But her love came with consequences. Unfortunately, her love for Jason would lead to a dark fate he couldn't have envisioned even if he tried. Now, the king of Colchis demanded Jason complete some impossible tasks. So the first task was the fire-breathing bulls. Jason had to yoke bronze bulls that breathed fire. So Medea gave him a potion that made him immune to flames. Task 2, the dragon teeth warriors. Jason had to plant dragon teeth in the ground. They grew into fully armed soldiers, and this is where Medea advised him to throw a stone among them. The warriors thought one of their own had attacked them and killed each other. And finally, task 3, the dragon guardian. He had to face the guardian of the Golden Fleece. You know, that massive serpent dragon that never slept? So Medea used powerful magic, enchanted herbs, sleep spells, and sacred chants. This encouraged the dragon to fall asleep. This is how Jason took the Golden Fleece. Okay? Now, Medea, who was so in love with this man, would commit a horrifying crime to help Jason escape. Or, if you want to call it, her first dark act for Jason, right? After Jason had stolen the fleece, Medea had fled with him. But her father pursued them with ships. To slow him down, Medea committed one of the darkest acts in Greek mythology. She killed her own brother. Now, in some versions of this myth, she cut his body into pieces and scattered them into the sea so her father would stop to gather them. Whatever she did, her father had to stop, and this allowed them to escape. But this act forever cursed Medea and Jason's future. This act strained their escape with blood, a curse that would forever haunt them. Now, there should be a triumphant ending to this story, right? But in Greek mythology, the greatest victories often carry the darkest consequences. What followed this quest was not glory, but betrayal, revenge, sadness, and tragedy involving Medea, who was a powerful sorceress, let's remember. So let's step into their final chapters, okay? So let's get this straight. Jason is an ambitious person trying to complete a goal, which, by the way, he didn't, who had the help of a woman who was a powerful sorceress and had fallen in love with him so much so that she forgot herself, she forgot her family, she put all her energy into him, right? And so after many adventures, Jason and Medea settled into the Greek city of Corinth. They had children together and they lived as a royal couple, but his ambition never truly disappeared. He abandoned Medea to marry Glauce, the daughter of King Creon. Now, for Jason, it was simply a political move, one that promised power and status, whereas for Medea, it was the ultimate betrayal. Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned. Medea's anger would become legendary, and based on everything we know about her, I would expect nothing less. Rather than simply confronting Jason directly, she planned a horrifying revenge. She was petty. So first, she sent a beautiful gift to Jason's new bride, a magical dress and crown. When Glauce put them on, the gifts ignited with supernatural fire. The dress burned her alive, the crown melted into her skin. King Creon rushed to save his daughter, but he was too consumed by the flames. But Medea's revenge didn't stop there. Okay. Now, what did we say about this? This was a very, very dark tale in Greek mythology, which means that throughout it, it gets darker and darker. Okay. Now, she committed an act meant to destroy Jason completely. And this tells you where her mental, emotional status was, okay? She killed their children. This act served two purposes. One was to punish Jason. The second was to prevent the children from being enslaved or murdered by Jason's enemies. It is one of the most shocking and tragic moments in all classical myth. Now, she could see that those kids were going to be the weak spot for Jason. But what kind of person do you have to be? How consumed do you have to be with rage to do that to your own children? But after the murders, Medea did not face punishment. Instead, the gods intervened. Her grandfather was the sun god Helios, and Helios sent a magical chariot pulled by dragons. This allowed Medea to escape into the sky, leaving Jason behind in horror. It is one of the rare moments in Greek mythology where the villain escapes divine justice. But Jason's life after Medea just became a slow collapse. He had lost his royal ambitions, his heroic reputation, and his children. Eventually, he returned to the rotting remains of his old ship, the legendary Argo. And as he sat beneath it, remembering his former glory, a piece of the ship's decaying wood broke loose and fell. It struck Jason and killed him instantly. This man, who had once commanded heroes and stolen the Golden Fleece, died alone beneath the ruins of his own legend. So let's just look at this from not a Greek mythology point of view, but of a relationship point of view. Jason, who had all this ambition, found a woman who fell head over heels in love with him, destroyed herself, destroyed her family, so he could get what he wanted. But then when he got what he wanted, he realized that that wasn't enough, and she went on a rampage. Understandably so. You do not mess with a scorned woman. Jason learned that the hard way. But the story of Jason and Medea reveals a darker truth about heroism in ancient mythology. The quest for the Golden Fleece wasn't the end of the story. Instead, it was the beginning of a chain of betrayal, of revenge, of broken promises, of ruined ambition. In many ways, the myth actually suggests that heroic glory often carries a terrible cost. See, the fleece wasn't just treasure. This fleece represented divine kingship. If you possessed the Golden Fleece, it meant that you had the favor of the gods, the right to rule, and supernatural legitimacy. Jason's entire quest was actually about reclaiming his rightful throne from his uncle Pelias. And that fleece was essentially a symbol of royal destiny. Seems like he forgot all about that throne, though. Just saying. Now, to honor the ram that saved Phrixus, Zeus placed the creature in the stars, and that constellation became Aries. You can still see it in the night sky today, and though it's one of the fainter, constellations. Some ancient star traditions loosely connect the ram of Aries to a cosmic dragon through the myth of the Golden Fleece. And remember, we talked last week about the dragons and rams kind of link, and this is probably where it came from. Now, there are some strange Aries mythology facts that we obviously should go through, and we will, because have I ever left you on this rabbit hole just sitting there? All right, so the story of Jason and Medea reveals a much darker truth about heroism in ancient mythology. The quest for the Golden Fleece wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of a chain. This chain included betrayal, revenge, broken promises, and ruined ambition. And in many ways, this myth suggests that heroic glory can often come at a terrible cost. Because in ancient myths, the fleece wasn't just a treasure. This golden fleece symbolized royal power. It represented divine kingship. And possessing this golden fleece especially meant that you had the favor of the gods, the right to rule, and supernatural legitimacy. Jason's entire quest was actually about reclaiming his rightful throne from his uncle Pelias, which he did abandon, let's note that, because this fleece was actually essentially a symbol of royal destiny. Now, how did Aries become a constellation? Well, to honor the ram that saved Phrixus, Zeus placed the creature in the stars, and that constellation became known as Aries. And you can still see it today in the night sky, though it's one of the fainter constellations. And some ancient star traditions loosely connect the ram of Aries to a cosmic dragon through the myth of the Golden Fleece. Remember, that never sleeping dragon. And last week we talked about the connections of dragons to Aries, and this is probably where it came from. But we are all about some rabbit holes, right? So we know that Jason and Medea's relationship in the myth, this myth especially, is one of the most intense and really tragic love stories in Greek mythology because it blends love, manipulation, power, and betrayal. And all of this is centered around Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece. So let's kind of go into that. All right. This is a rabbit hole that kind of interests me. So the beginning is where love was born from the quest. Jason's journey to retrieve the Golden Fleece from Colchis is where everything is going to begin. But here's the twist. He couldn't have succeeded without Medea. Remember, Medea was a powerful sorceress and the daughter of King Aetes. She falls in love with Jason, and it's really not entirely by choice. The goddess Aphrodite intervenes, and this causes Medea to become so deeply infatuated with him. And how this translates into Jason's heroic success is actually built on divine interference and Medea's sacrifice. Okay? Now, Medea's power. She is the real hero behind this whole thing because she uses her magic to help Jason complete those impossible tasks. Remember? The taming of the fire-breathing bulls, defeating the warriors sprung from the dragon's teeth, and putting that sleepless dragon guarding the fleece to sleep. Without her, Jason would have never succeeded, which creates a key dynamic. In public, Jason is the hero, but Medea is the hidden power. And let's be fair, how many power couples do you see that is it? Where the man is the public hero and the woman is the hidden power. Or it could go for any couple, really, not just men and women, but there's always one, the public hero and the one who's the hidden power. Now, let's look at the love versus loyalty, which is Medea's extreme sacrifice. See, she doesn't just help Jason on his quest. She betrays everything. She betrays her father, her homeland, and even her own family. Remember, she had to kill her brother, and she ended up killing her kids. This shows us that her love is all-consuming, risky, and morally complex. See, Jason benefits, but he doesn't sacrifice nearly as much as Medea did he? And of course, that the power imbalance and the gender dynamic is sickening in a way. Their relationship highlights a major theme in Greek mythology: male glory versus the female cost. Jason gains fame and kingship and legacy, whereas Medea loses her family, her identity, her stability. Her power is essential, but it's also feared and ultimately rejected. Now, the betrayal that turns to revenge. Remember, after returning to Greece, Jason abandons Medea to marry Glauce, right, for that political gain. But this is where everything explodes. Medea is the one who responds in full. She sends that poisoned gift that kills Glauce. She destroys Jason's future, and she kills their own children. And this transforms the story into one of betrayal, revenge, and the consequences of using people as tools. Now, when we psychologically analyze this, Medea is used and discarded. That's her feelings. She is experiencing deep betrayal trauma and she's reclaiming power through destruction. Jason, however, sees relationships as strategic, values status over loyalty, and underestimates Medea's agency. Big mistake. And this is why their relationship evolves from romance to partnership, to imbalance to betrayal to vengeance. Now, the Golden Fleece is significant here as a symbol because it represents ambition and glory, which is Jason's goal, power and legitimacy, and the cost of success. Yes, Jason gets the fleece, but he loses everything that helped him to get it and what he gained. You know what I mean? Jason and Medea's relationship is less about love and more about their power exchange, their emotional exploitation, and the consequences of betrayal. And it asks a powerful question. What happens when someone gives up everything for love and gets abandoned in return? The answer? Tragedy. Alright, so I love my strange facts, right? So let's talk about the fact that the golden ram could fly between the worlds, which linked the mortal and divine realms. Okay? That the never sleeping dragon made it nearly impossible to steal the golden fleece without help. And the sea where Hela fell still exists today and has been historically important for trade and war routes. The myth of Aries may symbolize kingship and divine legitimacy, since possession of the Golden Fleece meant rightful rule. The Argonauts' quest may have been inspired by ancient Greek trade expeditions to the Black Sea. And the fact that the myth begins with a planned human sacrifice. See, human sacrifices appear in many ancient mythologies, and this story may reflect early rituals where kings offered human victims during times of crisis. So rescues may occur, but the myth never forgets the dark beginning. And then we talk about the dragon in the sky. Some later astrologers speculated that the ram and the dragon represent two cosmic forces. So the ram represented Aries, the spark of life and courage. Anyhow, the dragon would represent the guardian of powerful destiny. Though it is not an official constellation connection, mystical traditions like to imagine a hidden myth link because of this. You know what I mean? Now, there actually could be a real basis of this myth. And so it could be actually based on real ancient gold mining. So, some historians believe the myth of the Golden Fleece might have originated from a real technique used in the Caucasus region. Miners placed sheepskins in mountain streams to trap gold particles in the wool. Once dried, the wool shimmered with gold dust, creating what looked like a golden fleece. This technique was reportedly used near the region of ancient Colchis. So, the mythical treasure might have been inspired by real ancient technology. And then we have to remember the symbol of courage and action, because we recall that the ram saved Phrixus by charging into the sky and escaping danger. Because of this, Aries became associated with bravery, leadership, and initiative. These traits carried over into astrology, where Aries is known as the warrior of the zodiac. We have to ask ourselves, was Jason truly a hero, or did he just get lucky? Did Medea truly deserve her tragic fate? And was the Golden Fleece actually a symbol of kingship and divine power? From a desperate escape across the sky to a legendary treasure guarded by a dragon, a never-sleeping dragon, Jason sailed across the world to seize the Golden Fleece. But the greatest danger was never the dragon guarding it. It was the curse that followed him home. The Golden Fleece is more than a heroic prize. It's a story of sacrifice, betrayal, magic, and destiny, all woven into the stars themselves. And every spring, when the constellation of Aries arises, the golden ram still runs across the heavens in the night sky. The ram of Aries reminds us that even in the darkest betrayals, courage can carry us to the stars. Because in Greek mythology, the greatest victories rarely end in happiness, and sometimes the true price of glory is paid long after the adventure ends. It reminds us of the darker lessons behind the myth. Rescue often requires sacrifice, destiny sometimes demands loss, and heroes rise from tragedy. Buttercups, I thank you for listening and for being a part of this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have a great week ahead. Now, should you have any questions, comments, or, maybe future topics, you can email me at harktistheteabell@gmail.com. You can locate me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube. And please remember that this is a one-woman show. So, as we go on this journey together, you are growing as I grow. But until next time, Buttercups.